Okay, so we are going to study of what we can today, a little bit of the parasha of the week, which is Tazria Metzorah. We have two parashiot. The parasha starts in chapter 12 of Vayikra with the laws of a woman giving birth. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Israel lemor, אישה כי תזריע וילדה זכר וטמאה 7 ימים כי מי נידת דבותיה תטמא וביום השמיני ימול בשר עורלתו. When a woman gives birth to a male, to a baby boy, she has to be impure for 7 days, and that uncleanliness will be equal to that of nidat devota. It's an interesting combination. Niddah is the term for a woman during her period, and dava or dave is someone who's in pain. So it's the combination of uncleanliness and pain, and here he speaks about impurity. וביום השמיני ימול בשר עורלתו, and on the 8th day you perform the brit milah. ו30 יום ו3 ימים תשב בדמי טהרה. She'll have for 33 days she sits for the blood of purification, which the Rabbi has understood that whatever blood she sees during those 33 days is not considered blood of Niddah, and she's tahor. So she has 7 days of tum'ah, of impurity, followed by 33 days of purity, altogether 40 days. And in verse 5, אם נקבה תלד ותמאה שבועיים כנידתה, ו60 יום ו6 ימים תשב על דמי טהורה. But if she gave birth to a girl, to a baby girl, she will be impure for 2 weeks and then pure for 66 days, altogether 80 days. So double the length of time of Tum'ah and Tahara in the case of a boy. Why the difference? It is not clear. We don't have any indication in the Torah to tell us why we have that difference. And the rabbis commented, midrashic comment, saying that the reason that Bayom HaShemini Mol Basar Olato, that for a boy, a woman is tameh only 7 days, is so on the 8th day when they have the brit milah, she could be with the father and she wouldn't feel isolated. That's an interesting concept. But I want to go before, maybe we'll have time to come back and analyze that, but to look at the biblical concept of the impurity of Niddah. What is exactly the setting or the framework of the halachot of Niddah? So right after this discussion of the woman who gives birth, we have a very long chapter, 59 verses. Of course, we shouldn't look at the length of the chapter as an indicator of the importance. We have to look at the paragraph in the Torah, but it is a long discussion. The reason that we shouldn't take too much into consideration the length of the chapters as they are numbered today, because this is a later system that was introduced in medieval times by a monk who copied the Tanakh, the Bible, and wanted to have an easy reference system. So created the books, some of the books not according to the Jewish division, and broke them into chapters. The verses were already there, most of them without difference. So, but anyway, there's a discussion that in the chapter that we have takes 59 verses. That's chapter 13. That speaks about tzaraat, about leprosy, and about different sites that a person has on his skin. Then it speaks about the metzorah, the leper, and the process of his purification, and about what happens when there is tzaraat, leprosy in the house. There's another long chapter of 59 verses, and that is followed in chapter 15 with the source, what we think is the source for Hilchot Niddah. And that's what I want to look at today. We have here a chapter that, a paragraph that comprises 33 verses and discusses 4 different cases. Zav, Zava, Niddah, and Shichvat Zera. So let's read through it. וידבר השם אל משה ואל אהרון לאמור, דברו אל בני ישראל ואמרתם עליהם, איש איש כי יהיה זב מבשרו זובו טמא הוא. Anyone who has an emission uncleanliness that is issued from his body will be tameh, will be unclean. What is the uncleanliness? Whether his flesh run with his issue or his flesh is be stopped from his issue, it is his uncleanness. So there is a certain emission or something that his body issues, and it goes on his flesh, and then it becomes tameh. His tumah is called zav. Ki zav. Zav literally means dripping. Ziva, lazuv, like as we say in a positive, much more positive connotation, Eretz Zavat Halav Udvash, the land that is dripping milk and honey. So that is kind of Ziva, and it's interesting maybe to point out that it does not refer to a clear liquid, even though we have the concept of Zovdam. It's usually Ziva is for a thicker liquid than water, and in that case, from verse Dalid to verse 15, the Torah discusses the purity and impurity of that person, whatever he sits on, whatever he sleeps on, whoever touches his beddings or something that he sat on becomes tameh. Even in verse 8, if the Zav spoke with a pure person and spat on him, he has to wash himself. This always seemed like something crazy. The Mishnah speaks about a situation where two people are talking and and spit touched one of them. But now that we are so aware of the isolation and the coronavirus, I've been in situations where I was talking from afar with people, and I saw that happening. As they were talking, you could see that saliva comes out. So that was something that it seems the Torah is concerned about, and we wonder if it has to do with infectious diseases. So this comes after the discussion of the Metzorah. And the Metzorah, it seems that the Metzorah is not something which is contagious, because the Kohen comes into the house. There is contact until the Kohen determines that the Metzorah is impure. He is still part of the community. Yes, Yoshua, I see you have a question.
Is that person? Hi, Rabbi. I'm sorry. Is that person a Baal Keri?
No, that's not Baal Keri. Baal Keri is someone who had regular emission of semen, of Shechvat Zera. Okay. And the concept Baal Keri did not exist at the time of the Torah. Baal Keri is the term that the rabbis gave to a person who had nocturnal, what they call nocturnal emission, or had sexual relationships and now has semen on his body, and now he has to go to the mikveh. That's what they said. He has to be tovel. There is an interesting discussion that I'm not going to bring up here, but I could share the article with you by Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Adler, who is also an archaeologist. There's a very interesting discussion about the lack of evidence of mikvaot, the way we know them today in Eretz Yisrael in biblical times. And he claims that what we read, V'rahatz b'mayim, is not necessarily going, sometimes they could go into a spring, but mikvaot did not exist in Eretz Yisrael in biblical period. Rather, when it says Rahatz b'mayim, people would wash themselves with a bucket or something similar. And from there, we have the concept that later on is mentioned in Halacha of Tish'a Kabin, of someone pouring on himself water to become pure. In any case, this is the first discussion. This is the first part of that chapter, of chapter 15 in Vayikra, speaks about the Zav. The Zav has emission on his body, and anyone who touches him, who gets near him, becomes Tameh. Then, in verse 13, we read this. After we discuss all the restrictions that are placed on that person who's tameh, it says, "V'chitar hazav mizovo, v'safar lo shiv'at yamim letahorato, v'chipes begadav, v'rachat besaro b'mayim chayim v'taher." And when the person who had that issue, that emission, now is cleansed of his of this emission that stops, he counts 7 days to mark his purity, and then he washes his clothes and he washes himself and he becomes pure, and then he comes to the Kohen, and the Kohen does the whatever sacrifice that needs to be done and declares him to be tahor. So remember, the first paragraph that we talk about is the zav. The Torah says that the zav has to be separated. There are very strict regulations of impurity placed on him, and once his emission stops, he has to count 7 clean days. Now we read the next paragraph, which is very short. It's 3 verses in total. ואיש כי תצא ממנו שכבת זרע ורחץ ואומר את כל בשרו וטמא עד הערב. And if a flow of seed go out from a man, that's interesting. In Hebrew, the word zera is the same for seed, the seed of a man and the seed of a plant. And that person has to wash in his body with water and become tameh until the evening. וכל בגד וכל עור אשר יהיה עליו שכבת זרע וכובז המים וטמא עד הערב. And anything that is covered with that seed should also be washed. And a woman with whom a man slept and had shechvat zera and had seed also has to wash herself. So it's a tumah of 1 day. And that's a shechvat zera, and that's what Yoshua was referred to as Baal Keri. That later Chachamim made a takana that everybody who had shechvat zera has to go to a mikveh. And later on this was canceled because it was too much for people to follow. Veisha, now we come to the next paragraph, which is a little longer. This one is 6 verses long. Veisha ki tiyeh zava, דם יהיה זובה בבשרה, 7 ימים תהיה בנידתה, וכל נוגע בה יטמא עד הערב. If a woman is zava, and that reminds us of the first term of the impure person that is called zav, דם יהיה זובה בבשרה, and that, but it says, ואישה כי תהיה is that תהיה זבה, דם יהיה זובה בבשרה, if she has an issue, she has an emission, and it's blood, 7 ימים תהיה בנידתה. Here, now we find the term Niddah that was mentioned in the beginning of Parashat Tazriah in chapter 12. She would be considered a Niddah for 7 days, and whomever touches her will become Tameh until the evening. The word Niddah is derived from the Hebrew verb nad, to be pushed aside or to move from side to side, as Cain is told, na'avanat tiyeh ba'aretz. So the Niddah is someone who's being pushed aside. She's isolated, and whatever she sleeps on, whatever she sits on becomes tameh. Whoever touches what she sleeps on or what she sits on, he becomes tameh. It's less than Ezav. You realize it's not as strict as that of Ezav. ואם שכב ישכב איש אותה ותהי נידתה עליו וטמא 7 ימים וכל המשכב אשר ישכב עליו יטמא. If a man sleeps with her, her tum'ah is transferred to him, and he becomes tameh for 7 days, and whoever he sleeps on becomes tameh. So this tum'ah is transferable through sexual relationship for 7 days. If it's not through sexual relationship, it's tum'ah of 1 day. But interesting to note that the Torah does not say that this relationship is forbidden or that it is punishable. And that's important to remember, because later in rabbinic literature, you will find that concept as ben anidah, something very, very, as a serious transgression. And that is how it is conveyed to anyone who is about to get married and learns the halachot of taharat hamishpacha, or family purity. So far, we've seen the first long paragraph discussing the zav, someone who has constant emission. Then shechvat zera, someone who has a flow of seed or semen. Okay, and then veisha ki tiyeh zava, the discussion of the zava, of the niddah. Sorry. Now, the last paragraph, which is longer, veisha ki yazuv zov dama yamim rabim belo'at nidata. There's a flow of blood for a woman for many days, not at the time of her niddah. Belo'at nidata. So now we know that this concept of ait nidata it is something that comes in a timely fashion. So this is clear now that Niddah is the period. The word period comes from that, right? Even the term menstruation comes from it because mens means month. So it's the monthly period, something that comes in a cycle, right? But the Torah now speaks about someone who has, a woman who has that ziva for many days without the time of the Niddah, or if the flow is on top of the Niddah, meaning in a continuation of the Niddah, as long as this continues, she will be tameh, like as if she's a Niddah, and that means that whatever she sleeps on, whatever she sits on, becomes tameh. It doesn't say what happens if someone sleeps with her, so I understand that naturally people should not sleep with her. If she becomes tahor, she should count 7 days, and then she becomes tahor, she becomes tehora, pure, and then she brings the korban. Now the Torah concludes, "Vehizartem et bnei Israel mitum'atam, velo yamutu betum'atam betame'am et mishkani asher betocham." Vehizartem is not from the word lehazhir, to warn, but rather from the word nazar, to push aside, like Niddah. And that's why the translation here reads, "You shall separate the children of Israel." It's from the word nazor wahor, so they'll separate them from this tum'ah, because that tum'ah will cause them death. How? Betame'am et mishkani asher betocham, because they will cause the mishkan, the tabernacle, to be tameh. Zot Torat hazav, va'asher tetzeh menu shichvat zera letum'ah ba, והדבה בנידתה, והזב את זובו לזכר ולנקבה, ולאיש אשר ישכב עם טמאה. The summary is somewhat confusing, because we speak about Torat Hazav, that was the first person that appeared, the person who had a constant flow, ואשר תצא ממנו שכבת זרע לטומאה בה, that's the second case of a person who had flow of seed, of semen, והדבה בנידתה, and a woman who was going through the period, והזב את זובו לזכר ולנקבה, and one who has ziva, one who has a constant flow, whether he's male or female, and the man who sleeps with an impure woman. Okay, so this is the summary of the chapter. Again, so we have 4 cases, but the Torah sums it up as 5 cases. And we talk about concepts of purity, impurity, death, being close to the tabernacle, counting 7 days. What exactly happens here? I want to sort of like try to bring some order to this parasha and compare it to the way the laws of Niddah have evolved in the way so people observe them today. But I see Yoshua again. You have a question? Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry because
Go ahead.
This has been a topic that with a lot of discussion these days with the coronavirus, right?
True.
So what is the actual punishment from the Torah perspective for the people who do not follow Tahara Hamishpacha Doraita?
Okay, it's a good question. We'll put it aside. We'll put it aside because we have to first try to understand what is Taharat HaMishpacha Doraita.
And also,
the
other question is,
yeah,
and I'll close my mic, is that the impurity in regards to what rituals that the person can perform.
Okay, good. So let's look at that. Let's look at the parasha again. And I'll say this, like what Yeshua mentioned. Right now, because of the coronavirus, there has been a debate. I've been talking about it from the very beginning. I said people should not go to the mikveh, period. The mikveh is dangerous. The mikvaot are dangerous not because of the water only, it's because of the surfaces and what people touch and don't touch. The rabbis, most of the rabbis in the Orthodox community are very, very reluctant to say anything about that. They're vehemently opposed to people using mikvaot other than the mikvaot that they have at home. But there are rabbis who are daring and are willing to speak. Besides me, I'm talking about Rabbi Haim Ovadia in Israel. He had Rabbi Eliyahu Bargel and Rabbi Bochko sign on his psak in a brochure that he published. And the last one to join that in a very clear voice, Rabbi Yitzhak Abadi from Lakewood in New Jersey, in his website, kashrut.org. People asked him the question. He said, a woman should go, if she needs to go to the mikveh, she should go to the use a bathtub in the house. As long as it covers all of her body, it's fine. She should go in it with a bathing suit. There's no problem. She doesn't have that. She said, rent an Airbnb if she has available nearby. Disinfect it and use it as a mikveh. I don't know how practical that is, but let's go back to the psukim and try to see what happens here in terms of the separation and the length of the period. First of all, and this is something we have to acknowledge, the term tum'ah and tahara, the term tameh, is offensive to many people. I say many people because it is offensive to some men and to many women, but not to all women. And it's not offensive to a lot of women, I think, mainly because of the question of education, of more indoctrination. The people have been brought up in a certain way, and they came to believe that this is a natural thing to have. It's natural to have this label. Women who were brought in an Orthodox world, with the Orthodox mentality, but are willing to think and question, are clearly upset with that concept of having that label attached to them every month for a process that is part of their natural cycle, right? And is actually the one that allows them to create life that men so greedily use. We could say, if you think about the way the rabbis explained the first mitzvah, what they call the first mitzvah in the Torah, apur v'milut haaretz, pirya v'rivya, they say you have a mitzvah to have children, but women are not obligated. Women are just the tool for men to fulfill the mitzvah, right? So it's a bit, we have to admit, it's a little bit perplexing, right? It would be perplexing if we think of, from an evolutionary point of view, for an evolution, from a psychological point of view, when you analyze the approaches of men and women to having children, you find out that they come from completely different perspectives. The women want to have children that they will take care of and they will nurture and protect. And it could be one child, it could be two children, as many as they can take care of. And they would choose the men based on his qualifications to take care of their offspring. There's a constant, you could say, race between men and women. Actually, it's something that plays at all levels of the natural world, from bacteria to humans, between males and females, for what they need from the species. We have a biologist on there, so Eduardo, that's your field, you could confirm, or I'm speaking as a layman. I read a book called The Red Queen that speaks about the role of sex in the evolution of humanity and in the natural world. And in that sense, that women, as I said, are interested in in creating that future generation and take care of it, nurture, protect it, where men are interested in just having as many children as possible, and for the sake of spreading their genes around the world. And that's why when you look at the history of great powerful leaders or tyrants, from Genghis Khan to Shlomo HaMelech to Ahasuerus, even to current leaders, they have harems. Modern leaders who can have harems just either get married and divorced several times, children from different wives, or have side affairs. But this is something that is embedded in our nature. It's a highly recommended book, and I enjoyed reading at least the second part that speaks about humanity after I passed all the bugs and plants at Nigeria, etc. In any case, we'll go back to this. This label of Tum'ah and Tahara is very, very upsetting. But we have to look at it, I think, in the and you're welcome to comment on that. I'm sharing my views, but you're welcome to comment on that. That is really something that is running through the Torah. It's a concept that runs through all ancient cultures, and even today, when you think about the way we label things with taboos and levels of cleanliness, that this is something, the concept of something which is out of boundaries or unclean, and we should not use, that exists everywhere. So we want to look at the Torah and ask ourselves, is the Torah making use of something, of a concept that exists and people already know, but the Torah uses it in a way that can benefit society? And that brings it, so that brings me to the question that Yoshua raised before. What exactly are the limitations of Tumah and Tahara, and where do they apply? So it seems as if the central axis around which the whole concept of Tumah and Tahara revolves is the temple, right? In most of the places where the Torah speaks about Tumah and Tahara, it applies to the temple. You cannot enter the temple if you are Tameh. Why is that? Obviously because the Torah wants to create a certain halo of a certain status, the elevated status for that sanctuary. It is a reserved place. It's a place that you don't go into easily. You have to clean yourself. There's a process of preparation before you go in, right? We have something similar in Hilchot Tefillah. Before you start praying, you wash your hands. You want to dress nicely. In the long run, with the temple, didn't really work, unfortunately, because people kept the external rituals. Maybe they washed their hands and their feet and their clothes and everything, but as Yeshayahu says, it says, what I really want you to clean is not your hands, but your actions, right? But that was the concept. The idea was that we elevate the temple to that status of a place that is really venerated, and when we enter it with reverence, we enter with respect. That is the temple. There's another set of laws of Tumah and Tahara that speaks about eating, right? We just read in Parashat Shemini, Latameh ve'latahor, that we have Hayat Me'ah ve'Hayat Tehora, right? It's the Tameh animal, the unclean animal. So it's not that that these animals will make us pure or impure, but rather here again it's a question of boundary. It's to say, this is you don't cross that line to eat these animals. And why you don't eat these animals? There are different explanations. I think it's a combination of protecting nature, because we don't eat the animals that are you could call them the sanitation core of nature, but also it's something that teaches us awareness and restraint, because we learn to keep ourselves from when we have a craving, we don't eat right away. This is something that, like the marshmallow test, where people are examined on whether they need instant gratification or not. But really the idea is boundaries. We have another case of Tumah and Tahara, and that's Tum'at Met. There also, one could argue that it would be unfair to consider someone who has become who came in contact with the dead body to say that he's tameh. Why would that person be tameh? What is his fault? What did he do wrong? But we could say that, and that's my way to interpret Tum'at Met, that there again it's a boundary, a spiritual boundary between the place where that person who's grieving or who came in contact with the violence that caused death and the rest of the world. That Rabbi, person needs. Yes, Rabbi, David.
Yeah, quick question. Weren't the other religions always tied to death, and we always try to get away from death?
Yes, it's true. With perfect.
So to speak, we use it as, like you said, about, you know what I mean?
Right. It's a good question coming from a Kohen, because you're the Kohanim in the.
If I'm walking in the street and I see someone that died, I have to take care of that.
You would, right.
I'm the person around, so.
Right. So the reason but the reason the Kohanim were not allowed to handle dead people unless there was an emergency and no one else to take care of them was exactly as you mentioned, that the Torah is a Torah of life. It doesn't focus on death, it focuses on life. If the Kohanim would be allowed to handle the dead, then they would become the gatekeepers to the underworld, to the world to come, and every like religion would be channeled through them. And ironically, this is what happened.
Mitzrayim was based on death.
And this was exactly Mitzrayim, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we are alienating ourselves from the Egyptian culture. Ironically, it happens to the rabbis later on. The rabbis took the place of the Kohanim, and the rabbis became the gatekeepers. So some rabbis, and I've said from experience, some rabbis rise to the occasions, and the rabbis or the members of the Havra Kadisha, which we also have here on board, members of the Havra Kadisha really do their that role of taking care of the people who are grieving and the people who are in pain with dedication and honesty, and others are using it to manipulate people. They tell them this is what you have to do, or this is, you have to give money here and money there, and it will say all kind of things.
So the next step you could say, Rabbi, also is Olam Haba. It's the same.
That's God willing. When we get to Parashat Hukat, we will talk about that. But I wanted to say that the Tum'ah of Tumat Met is not. They didn't really know. If you look at the physical separation there, you could say it's about protecting people from germs that are carried with a dead body. They didn't really know about that. I mean, nobody knew about that until the mid 1800s, and even until recently. Not enough separation in cases where it was needed, but it was there to create a separate category of people who needed help. And the Kohanim, when they performed the ritual of Para Aduma, that's when they would provide help, the help needed for the person who was Tameh. So then the word Tameh really comes from the word, from the bi-radical word Tam, Tet Mem, that means to block or to close. So there's something who's blocked or separate from the community, not necessarily Tameh in a negative way. So here also we look at the label Tameh that is given to those people as a means to protect them and protect society. So there's in those four categories that we saw, Zav.
Rabbi, one quick question.
Yes.
Can't you say that the Kohen was, so to speak, like the doctor? If like in the house, or Sarat, so he would come in and say, okay, Sarat, you have to clean up the house and get out.
Yeah, like, we could say that. We could say that about Sarat, yes.
No, even other things, it's like sanitary type of stuff. Oh, you have this, do this, get clean, and then come back. You'll be better in 7 days.
Yeah, we could say that about, right.
I'm just saying it's so
cases that did not get to death, right? At death, the Kohen is
not death. Also, they came for all questions. He was the source.
Right, the Kohen was right. This is referred to in Malachi, towards the end of Malachi. The Navi says, "Ki siftei Kohen." Let me go there 1 second and show the pasuk. That's interesting comment that you made. 1 second. In towards the end of Malachi, we read this: "Ki siftei Kohen yishmeru da'at, v'Torah yibakashu mipihu, ki malach Hashem tzevaot hu." The lips of the Kohen are the guardians of knowledge, and they will seek Torah from his mouth, for he is like the angel, not the angel, sorry. He is like the messenger of God. This is in chapter 3, if I'm not wrong, or chapter 2. Let me see. Yeah, chapter 2, verse 7 says, "Ki siftei kohen yishmeru da'at, v'Torah yivakashu mipihu." Or before that, "Torat emet hayta befiu ve'avla lo nimtza b'sfatav, בשלום ובמישור הלך איתי, ורבי משיב מעוון. כי שפתי כהן ישמרו דעת, ותורה יבקשו מפיהו, כי מלאך אדוני צבאות. The law of truth was in his mouth, of the Kohen, and unrighteousness was not found on his lips. He walked with me in peace and uprightness. He did turn many away from iniquity. For the Kohen's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth, for he is a messenger of Hashem, of the Lord of hosts. So this is the way the Navi sees the Malachi sees the Kohen. The Kohen is a teacher, an instructor. He helps the nation, right? So, but we're going back to the idea of tum'ah. When I spoke about different types of tum'ah, and I go back to the tum'ah of zav and niddah, etc. So we could say that this tum'ah, the concept there, even though later on it was used in a derogatory manner, was really there to protect people. It doesn't say that those people, I mean, for some of them, are evil or at a negative state, just that they are tameh, therefore they're separated from the temple. Now we could say that there are two different categories here, and they go in the format of an envelope and a section that is inlaid inside, or you could say A, B, B, A, meaning the first and last of the four are connected, and the second and third are connected. So let's go back to this text and read it now, and try to understand what we're talking about here. We have four cases of people who have some kind of emission from their body, and that emission makes them tameh. Two of them are abnormal, are irregular, and therefore they have to count 7 days after they're done, after this tumah is over. This is in the first case of the zav, and you see this in chapter 15, verse 13. When he becomes tahor, he has to count 7 days. It doesn't appear in the second paragraph or in the third paragraph, right? Even though it says that she will be tameh for 7 days, it's a measured period of tum'ah, but there's no counting after the 7 days. However, with the fourth case, it says that im tahara mizova, it is in chapter 15, verse 28, the im tahara mizova, v'safra la shiv'at yamim v'hartithar, and once she becomes tahor, she has to count 7 days, and then she becomes tahor. What the idea of counting 7 days and then being allowed to go back into the community, what does it remind us? In today's reality, I think it's not hard to make the analogy, right? It's being quarantined. This is basically what is happening here. The tameh, the first and fourth case of this paragraph, of this chapter, are being quarantined because they are carriers of infectious diseases. Could be that they are sexually transmitted diseases. They're called ziva. And because they are so dangerous, when the Torah sums it up, the Torah mentioned the zav twice. Now we understand the closing paragraph. It was more, the diseases were more common among men than among women. And that's why the Torah concludes, Zot Torat HaZav. The zav is the first case. A person with sexually transmitted disease. Then Shichvat Zera, someone has semen, Ve'adava benidata, the niddah, Ve'hazav et zovo, one who has irregular flow, Zachar unekeva, whether it's man or a woman, and in general, Le'ish asher yishkav im teme'ah, a man who sleeps with an unclean woman, which is mentioned here regarding the niddah, but it is emphasized again to say that a relationship like that is forbidden, because so you would ask, why doesn't it say why doesn't it mention a woman who sleeps with a tameh man? Because if you look at the way that the separation of the zav is mentioned, it's much more severe than that of a woman, who is zava. Let's look at it. See, if when we speak of a man, this is in the first paragraph, we say this: Kol mishkav, whatever he sleeps on, whatever he sits on, whoever touches what he sleeps on, whoever sits on what he sits on, whoever touches his flesh, where he spits on someone, whatever he rides, whoever touches whatever is underneath him, whoever carries whatever that object that was under the zav, whoever was touched by the zav, if a clay vessel touched the zav or a wooden vessel. So 12 items are mentioned regarding the man who has ziva. But when we talk about a woman who has ziva, we read kol mishkav, כל הכלי וכל הנוגע בהם. 3 items. Was less common and maybe was considered less contagious because it was only be transmitted sexually, whereas the men could have been considered to be transmit that tum'ah physically. So we have the zav and the zava, the people with illnesses that frame 2 cases of regular emissions. One is shichvat zera, the either nocturnal emission or with sexual relationship. One who has shichvat zera, seed or semen, and then you just have to wash your body. And then ve'isha ki tiyeh zava, and if a woman has, when she has the period, menstruating, shivat yamim tiyeh benidata, she would be considered niddah for 7 days. And what happens at the end? What happens at the end of those 7 days? What happens?
She's clean.
She's clean, right? Torah doesn't say that she has to go, that she has to wash. There's no washing. There's no mikveh. There's nothing. There's no counting of days. Right? So what is happening here? So let's start with the 7 days. And with the 7 days, we also talk about what was the benefit of those laws of Tumah and Tahara for the community, for the people. So the benefit of Tumah, the label of Tumah, of impurity, for the Zav and the Zava, for those who have sexual diseases or infectious diseases, is clear, right? You're protecting them and you're protecting the community. Now, the quarantine is not limited to 7 days. It is the period of the disease plus 7 days. Once the irregular flow stops, then you count 7 days. And if during those 7 days nothing happened, then that Zav can bring the Korban, go through the ritual, and go back into the camp. So that is it could take months, it could take years. We never know when this is going to be over. Now, in between we have the Shichvat Zera and Niddah. When we say the Niddah is impure for 7 days, it doesn't say what she has to do afterwards. Does she have to go to the mikveh if she goes, or does she have to wash herself to have relationships with her husband, with her man? It doesn't say that. To go into the temple, yes, because everybody who was tameh going to the temple would have to go to the mikveh. But the mikveh is to enter the temple and not for having relationships. This is according to biblical interpretation. The rabbis later on said that it is a prohibition, and that they derive from the pasuk. 1 second, let me get this pasuk. Let's see if I did. Once again, it's like here, handling the text. So the rabbis were really trying to get the prohibition of of being with the Niddah. Or is that either here? No, actually in Vaikra. So here, it says Vaikra chapter 18, verse 19. It says Ve'elisha bin nidat tumata lo tikrav legalot arvata. You should not approach a woman during her nidah, because this is considered nakedness, it's considered unclean. That's in chapter 18. Chapter 19, which speaks about, is it 19 or 20? Yes. Chapter 19 that speaks about the punishment says, Ve'isha she'ishka v'ti'isha dava, ve'gilat avata, a man who sleeps with a woman having her sickness should be put to death. So now that sickness can be understood as Niddah, because in our parasha we said Niddat devota, or it can be understood as a Zava, something that is more severe. But also, even if we take it to understand to mean the Niddah, as the rabbis did, The question is, what takes the woman out of the state of Niddah? Is it the end of the 7 days or going to the mikveh? And there's a debate about that. There's a long debate. I wrote an article about it, showing that it is probable, again, this is, I'm not saying it lahalacha, it is probable that in biblical times, a woman who was not required to go to mikveh at the end of the Niddah, at the end of the period of the Niddah. That was rather something that was established by the rabbis. And that's why we have extensive literature in rabbinic literature speaking about the importance of going to the mikveh and fighting with the idea of ben Niddah, of someone who was born to a woman who was Niddah, etc. Even though in practice, most probably women would go to the mikveh before they went to the temple. But what happened, I mean, this we'll put this aside for a second. This is something that is disputed among commentators that would say, if you follow the oral law, Torah shebe'al peh, the rabbis definitely believed that that's what we have in tradition, that a woman should go to the mikveh. I'm talking about the way the psukim are interpreted, the way Ibn Ezra and Rashbam in many places say this is the pshat of the pasuk. So this is what I'm saying. The pshat of the pasuk is the Torah does not demand that a woman would go to mikveh after the period of the Niddah. And when the Torah speaks about the punishment or the prohibition of being with the Niddah, it refers to the woman within the 7 days. Now, why is that important? If we speak about the laws of Tumah as a means of protection for the community or for the individual, in the case of women trying to protect their intimacy or privacy, it was important to them because this was the one thing that enabled them to tell the husbands or to tell men who were pious to keep away from them, right? And this is something that the rabbis actually mentioned. They comment on the pasuk in Shir HaShirim, Suga b'shoshanim, you are fenced with a fence of roses. They say, look at the beauty of the Jewish religion. The fence is a fence of roses, meaning there's a fence made of flowers. All the woman has to tell her husband is that she sow redness like a petal of a rose, and he will keep away from her. Maybe the author of that comment was a woman. They go, women found out at a certain point, that they could use that as a tool to keep their husbands away. And that's where we got the idea of Shiv'a Nikiim, right? Because today, the way the Hilchot Niddah are taught, after the beginning of the period, a woman has to wait for the period to end and then count Shiv'a Nikiim, 7 clean days, that correspond really to the 7 clean days of the person who emerges from a quarantine, either a Zav or a Zava. How do we take a healthy, normal process and turn it into an illness? A combination of several factors. One is what I just mentioned, I'll go back to. Before that, there was the obsession of people, especially during the Second Temple period, with cleanliness and with purity. And the more they got away from the temple, and especially after the destruction, they became more obsessed because this was for them a way to make up for the lost temple. If you know of sectarian Judaism, the Jews who fled the temple and went to the desert, this is what they focused on Tefillah. In order to become a member of the sect called Isiyim, you had to go to the mikveh maybe 7 times a day, and that's in the area of Yam HaMelach, of the Dead Sea. Not easy to get fresh water. If you got unclean, you lost everything. You have to go to the beginning. A process would take sometimes a year until you you were admitted into the caste. Christianity sprang out of the ranks of these sects. John the Baptist, Yohanan HaMatzbil, as he's called in Hebrew, was one of those, a member of one of those sects which really put an emphasis on purity. So it's easy to understand that in an atmosphere where every little thing was labeled as Tameh and Tahor, we have a whole order in the Mishnah, Seder Teharot, that deals with it, and they talk about the handles of the of vessels and the stems of fruits and different situations where we become tamei tahor, that women would, as I said before, indoctrinated and made believe that they are tameh, that they are impure. At a certain point, they say, you know what? Just to be sure, I want to extend it another 7 days, like the Zaven Zav of the Torah. That's one element. The other element was probably the will of women to keep their husbands away, and this is something that appeared later on in Christian culture, much later, in the 1500s. There's a book called the book by Diane Elliott. It's called Holy Marriage or something. I have to look up the title. She speaks about the sort of a celibacy vow that women took upon themselves in medieval times. But those are women who were married, had children, and they would tell their husbands that they decided to become celibate from now on and dedicate themselves to the church. And the author explains that this was because men were, I don't want to say the word pigs, but they really did not treat their wives with respect, did not care about them. And the only way for a woman to keep her husband away was by making this kind of vow. So I read about this in a book by Avraham Grossman, an Israeli historian, in a book called Vehu Yimshol Bach. He has 2 books on the topic. One is called Hasidot Umordot, which is also available in English. It's called Pious and Rebellious, about women's status throughout history in Jewish literature. And the second is called Vehu Yimshol Bach, which I don't think is translated yet. But it was interesting to me that Grossman makes the comment when he talks about this vow of celibacy in Christian culture. He says we don't have an equivalent in Hebrew literature, and I found it interesting and amusing because this is really where what we call the Humrah of the Rabbi Zera, the additional 7 days. This is where it came from. So when we go back and we look at the biblical paragraph, we see that in reality, the Torah tries to emphasize for people how dangerous sexually transmitted diseases are, and this pretty early on tells people, that a man or a woman who have irregular flow should be kept away. You should keep your distance from them. In between, the Torah mentions something that looks to most people similar, but draws a clear distinction and says this is normal for a man with shechvat zera after sexual relationship. He should wash himself, and by the evening he's clean. For a woman, for her protection, the Torah gave the woman the average length of the period, 4 to 5 days usually, plus 2 or 3 days to relax. 7 days is a nice number, and then she can go back to normalcy. There's a lot more to discuss. I just wanted this as a sort of a commentary on the parasha. So I'll conclude the show here. I'll stop the recording, and then we can ask questions.
Mikvaot.
Once again. So let's conclude the discussion here. And as I said, once we finish, I will open it for questions.